we're talking all things Perpetual calendar. And we know that the Big Pilot itself was designed to be a functional tool. And in 2002, when we saw the first edition, 5002, it had no complications. And it wasn't until 2006 that we saw the famous Kurt Klaus designed Perpetual calendar feature in the Big Pilot framework. David, pleasure to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing very fine, and I'm really happy that today we have our Perpetual mission with the Big Pilot watch.
Please tell me what you have in front of you. You've got some interesting pieces.
Oh yes, I mean, first, I'm very excited and I'm really honored to show you this one. You mentioned it, the first Big Pilot, or let's say combination of the Perpetual calendar and the Big Pilot was launched 2006, but here we have really an outstanding one from 2019. And I guess a lot of people will know who was the famous designer of this watch. And on the other hand, 2021, it's the year of the Big Pilot. We have a beautiful Perpetual calendar, stainless steel case that will come into the new collection. And it's really gorgeous looking. And I think we should have some talks about these two timepieces.
When I think of IWC, David, I think of Perpetual calendar. And I just wondered why that particular complication was so deeply connected to the brand.
Yes, we have to go a little back into the history in the 1980s. You may know, 1970s, most of all were very challenging for watchmaking companies that still had got the tradition of the mechanical watches, so IWC. And we were really looking for new things, new complications to bring on the market, to please that small group of people who like still mechanical watches. And Mr. Kurt Klaus, his project was to make a Perpetual calendar for the wrist. And this was, let's say, the initial for the Perpetual calendar that we still have, that we see in our Big Pilot watches, for example, here. And it was a huge success for us because it was the first Perpetual calendar you just can change via the crown. And Mr. Kurt Klaus also tried to limit the quantity of pieces to make the best quality, and also for his fellow watchmaker colleagues that they have a smooth assembly when it comes to assemble the movement. And like you said, the first Perpetual calendar was with a chronograph, and then later we had the same module on the watch only, so to speak, without a chronograph. And this is what we see here also in the Big Pilot. But the module is quite the same. So it still traces back to what Kurt Klaus launched in the year 1985.
And 2006, we saw that particular module dropped into the framework, the design DNA that we all know and love, the Big Pilot. What were people's response back then?
It was only for people, who know about IWC and know the Big Pilot, because the first generation of the Big Pilot with the Perpetual calendar was introduced with limited editions. So this turned into another direction when 2012, with the Perpetual calendar Big Pilot Top Gun, it was officially launched at SIHH. And then I think the reaction was quite positive.
I understand, David, you also have a limited edition there that was designed by one of the greatest and now the greatest of all time when it comes to motor racing. We've got Lewis Hamilton's edition there. Can I ask how involved he was in that design process? Because, of course, the Big Pilot has gone through a number of different limitations in colors and finishes over its relative short lifetime. But that's got to be one of the boldest design combinations we've seen so far.
Yes, and like Lewis mentioned, he said it's a kind of disruptive. And yes, it is. I think the color code is very bold. It's a statement. And I think it's only Lewis Hamilton who is able to choose this. And it's absolutely great. And yeah, it was disruptive.
Now, David, I know that they didn't last very long, but how many references of the Lewis Hamilton Perpetual calendar Big Pilot were made?
100 pieces and one prototype, like you see here. And always what reminds me, because we were talking about the combination, maybe you can say the gold is everlasting and the ceramics is really the material for innovation. So also, maybe the same with the race car.
And that reference you have alongside it there, David, from this year, that Perpetual calendar is a member of the family moving forward. It's not a limited edition. It's going to be available for the next couple of years.
Yes, stainless steel case and with a very, very beautiful blue dial.
It's the sort of big pilot that you might be able to get away with on a daily basis. Really, really cool. David, thank you very, very much as always. Pleasure to speak to you, and look forward to catching up soon on the next edition. The iconic IWC Perpetual calendar operated on the big pilot through the onion crown. It tells us the day, the date, the month, and of course the moon phase. It is also reassuring to know that it will require almost no intervention until 2499. It's always good to know.